Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
The words of Torah we're engaging with this morning are the ones from the last parsha before the book of Exodus begins. So this is the last parsha of the book of Bereshit, of Genesis. It is the end, of course, of the Joseph story, the Joseph narrative, and it takes place at the time that it seems that Yaakov is on his deathbed. He's preparing for death. Most sources agree that when this happens, it's really about, he knows within the next year or so, right? So it's not necessarily that it's immediate, but he knows he's weakening and he knows it's time to put his house in order, as it were, right? We don't wait until we're completely compromised on the deathbed to do our will, right? We make sure all of the arrangements that we want to take care of for the family, we make sure that happens while we're still able to do it, but sometimes don't really go there until urgency, right? A sense of some urgency drives us there. So this is the place we're at with Yaakov. We've not studied together the last few weeks, so we've missed a big chunk of the Joseph story, but I trust you.
Just say, Amy, even though we know you deserve a little rest from time to time, I have missed Torah studies so much.
That is a good thing. It's such a blessing, and it's a great thing to hear. I too miss it, actually, even on vacation. I was like, wait, what? Like, it's Friday. Like, where are my people? So the story, most of you, I trust, know enough of the story, right, to know that Joseph has let his brothers know who he is. They've made some kind of peace with one another, and now we're at this very last scene between Yaakov and Yosef.
283. Oh, you're
293. 293.
When Pesach comes around,
We can do the part of this parsha about plagues.
Plagues are later.
So plagues are in Exodus, right? When we talk about leaving Egypt, no worries. That's what we're here for, to remind ourselves. No plagues in the Joseph story. Lots of troubling things, lots of difficulty and suffering, but no plagues exactly. Although I would love to see the version that you would paint of the Joseph story with plagues and what that might look like. So let's look at Parashat Veyechi, which is chapter 47, verse 28. And everybody there? Okay.
Jacob lived 17 years in the land of Egypt, so that the span of Jacob's life came to 147 years. And when the time approached for Israel to die, he summoned his son Yosef and said to him, "Do me this favor, place your hand under my thigh as a pledge of your steadfast loyalty. Please do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my fathers, take me up from Egypt and bury me in their burial place." He replied, "I will do as you have spoken." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed at the head of the bed.
All right, so when one is coming to make arrangements at the end of life, there are a couple of categories of things that are usually foremost in our mind. The first one is, where am I going to be buried? And in the ancient world, as in today's world in some ways, it depends on your descendants to take care of that for you. So now we can make all kinds of arrangements, and I suppose it could happen without dependents, but they're your agent once you're no longer able to do anything for yourself. Your descendants are your agents who are going to be the only ones who can enact your will, essentially. And so it's very important to know where we're going to rest. It is something that is really a deep part of what it means to make peace with the end of life, is to know where our remains will be or what will happen with them if it's not a place, right? To know To have some kind of sense of closure about and security, knowing that here's where either my burial place will be, or this is where they're going to spread the ashes. Hi, Brian. Welcome. Come sit. George doesn't usually bite, so you can sit next to him. That's George. That's Elaine. Not usually, but yes.
I know we've discussed this, but I forget. Is there a particular reason why it went between Jacob and Israel?
So the name is used interchangeably until a point in this parsha where it is exclusively Yaakov that's used. And so the commentators have, lots of wonderful, good time exploring, like, why is it Yaakov, from here on? So I would love for us, when we're done with this, for you to tell me why you think it's Yaakov here and not Yisrael, right? Throughout this end of the story. All right. So the burial. So remember when we have things like this, when we have the end of life situation here and what's going to happen here with him making arrangements, these are rituals, right? This is a ritual moment. So that's what you're seeing here. This is not just, hi son, can you please bury me? And, oh, sure, Dad, I'll do that. Okay, great, right? This is a real ritual. And what is the indication of that? What is this business with hands under thighs?
It's like a pledge.
The testicles.
The testicles, yes. Testimony. Very good, Reuben. Very good memory. Testimony. Testify, right? So placing the hand under the thigh places the hand close to the testes, which is a symbol for a symbol of trust. Yes, indeed. And intimacy. It could turn out really badly, right? Which is why we shake hands, right? To show that my hand doesn't conceal a weapon. So it's a sign of trust. If I clasp hands with you with my sword hand, then there's no sword in it, right? So I can't, or my dagger hand, whatever. So many of these acts are acts of vulnerability and the trust that entails, which is what gives the act power, right? Part of what gives it power. Also progeny, right? The testes are about future fertility, not just that you'll have children, but that because Yaakov has a bunch of adult children and he has grandchildren, as we see. So it's not about that they'll have them, but that they will do well. That you can have lots of children in the ancient world, and it still might come to absolutely nothing, right? If there's a famine, right? So, or things don't go well, or there's war, and they lose, and their city's razed to the ground, it doesn't matter how many kids you started with, right? So all of that is implicated in this under the thigh business. Where have we seen this before? Exactly. Abraham has Eliezer put his hand under his thigh to take the oath to find a bride for Yitzchak and to say that he will never take Yitzchak out of the land. So we've seen this before. This is not new. This is absolutely normative in terms of a very serious vow, a very serious promise that's going to happen. So that's what's happening, this ritual moment where do me this favor, says Yaakov, place your hand under my thigh. Yes?
Why do they do it twice? Usually they always do things purposely. So why does he says, I will do as you spoke, and then he says, swear to me, and he says, I will do as you spoke?
So I say, I will absolutely do what you've asked. Now what does he answer?
Thank you. Not swear to me.
So then what? So why doesn't he say thank you? What swear to me?
Yeah, like he doesn't believe.
It's part of the oath. It's part of the ritual. This is part of the ritual. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?
I do.
Right? Why would you be standing here if you weren't ready to take her as your lawfully wedded wife? Right?
Swear to me after.
So what?
I wouldn't say swear to me again.
You might. Right? So.
I do.
Yes, I said I do. So it's So ritual is crafted by different cultures, right, in different ways. And clearly this ritual is the physical act of placing the hand under the thigh, right? So he has Joseph do that, right? And he says, let that be a pledge, right, of your steadfast loyalty. And now comes the ritual words. Please do not bury me in Egypt. So that's the formulaic piece of what he's formally now with the hand under the thigh asking Joseph. And when I lie down with my fathers, take me from Egypt and bury me in their burial place. He replied, Joseph replies, I will do as you have spoken. And he says, Yaakov says, swear to me. It's not enough to agree. Now it comes to the ritual swearing. I swear to, we see that lots of places where you raise your hand and I swear. And it's the formal, ritual oath. And he says he swears to him, and Israel bows at the head of the bed. Probably there's some ritual involved with the person who's just been promised something to thank the other person by indicating that physically. But if Yaakov is indeed ill or frail or at the end of his life, it's possible he can't get out of bed to do that. So he does the next best thing. He indicates a bow in bed.
There's a commentary in the Red Book here about steadfast loyalty, what's translated as steadfast loyalty, which is, the Hebrew says chesed ve'emet, which has, at least to me, a completely different sense of chesed, of loving kindness and faithfulness and truth.
Yes.
Steadfast loyalty just doesn't do it.
Right?
What is your feeling?
Ve'asita imadi chesed ve'emet. So that you shall do to me, you shall behave towards me with chesed ve'emet, right? And this is, one of the things the rabbis talk about all things around death are chesed ve'emet, because they cannot be repaid. So act towards me in chesed and emet, in loving kindness and truth, is about, because there's nothing, you're not going to get repaid for it, say the rabbis, right? That all these things around death are about truly an act of wanting to do something for the other that is completely selfless, because they can't then do something nice for you.
Like Yisro.
Yes, absolutely. Reuben?
I do not think there's any significance to the formality with which Jacob is speaking to Joseph, almost like a supplicant rather than a parent to a son.
I think absolutely there is meaning. What do you think that might be?
His position, I would guess.
Joseph's position?
I'm guessing.
Right, Joseph's a pretty powerful guy. This is his turf. This is his wheelhouse. It's his neighborhood. So certainly there's some of that. But I think the ritual formality and the supplication part of the ritual is that really, when we're talking about end of life stuff, we have no power to control what the other person's going to do if it's about when we're gone, right? I think there is, no matter how powerful one is, when it comes to asking that our remains, a certain thing happen after our death, we really are complete supplicants in terms of whether or not it will be fulfilled for us, right? All right, good. Right, 48.
Sometime afterward, Joseph was told, your father is ill. So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, your son Joseph has come to see you, Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed.
All right, so obviously he was not on his deathbed. Here's the proof. Right? Sometime after that, now he's ill to the point of they're expecting the end.
And Jacob said to Yosef, El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me and said to me, I will make you fertile and numerous, making of you a community of peoples, and I will assign this land to your offspring to come for an everlasting possession. Now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine no less than Reuben and Simeon. But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. They shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. I do this because when I was returning from Padan, Rachel died to my sorrow while I was journeying in the land of Canaan, when still some distance shortfall of Ephrath, and I buried her there on the road to Ephrath, now Bethlehem.
Okay. So Joseph has come to see his father, who presumably is dying, and he gathers his last strength to be able to sit up and greet his son. And he says, El Shaddai appeared to me in Luz. Where's Luz? This is the original name of Bethel. What happened in Bethel for Yaakov?
Bless you.
Bless you.
The angel.
The angel, right? So this is, Bethel is where Yaakov's name was changed from Yaakov to Yisrael after he wrestles with the Ish, Malach, whatever.
And what is the significance of El Shaddai instead of Elohim?
It's a good question. Let me look at 17.
One of the many names of God.
Another one of the many names for God, but on 17:1.
Naming the same God.
El Shaddai is to be identified with Yud He Vav He. This accords exactly with Exodus 6:2. I am Yud He Vav He. I appeared to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as El Shaddai. So linking this, this is the same God that spoke to Abraham and to Yitzchak and then to Yaakov. So on the etymology of El Shaddai, that's a whole nother conversation. Some people want to call it being about a mountain. Shade in Hebrew is breast. So Shaddai would be breasts. Shaddai, my breast. So Rabbi Arthur Waskow has a whole piece on the many-breasted God. So possibly a holdover from a matriarchal image, right? A feminine image of the divine nurturer, right? If you look in the ancient world, the image of the goddess is always with big thighs and a belly and, right, and large breasts, because that was the symbol of God giving life and sustenance and fertility, fecundity, right, in all ways, in all things. And so there's some folks who want to make it about a mountain. I'm not so convinced, right? I mean, I think we have to take seriously the possibility that this is a leftover from earlier feminine imagery for God.
The comment in the Red Book on 17:1 says, refers to the Midrash understanding El Shaddai to mean the God who says die, enough. As in, when we say Dayenu at Passover, that dies. So, like, it's time to stop behaving like children.
You gotta love the rabbis. They're just gonna ignore the shin, right? This is die. Enough. Because the people of Israel certainly need to be told enough, like quite often, but gotta love the rabbis. So, all right. So, and we've heard God say before, in 17, what God is saying is, your ancestors before me knew me as El Shaddai. I am Yud He Vav He. I am that same God. I am both El Shaddai and Yud He Vav He. You have to remember this is early after polytheism, right? So there's a constant need to remind everybody that we're talking about the same God, even if there are different names. Because before this, different names meant different deities. In Canaan, let's say it again, Israelites were converted Canaanites. We were Canaanites. So when you have different names, the instinct is, now we're talking about a different God. So constantly, early Israel has to be told or reminded or it's reaffirmed, El Shaddai is the same as Yud He Vav He, is the same as Elohim, is the same as Adonai, is this, right? It's the same. Because that is not normative in the ancient Near East at this time.
And this is our great plea to the Arabs that this land belongs to us.
So this is the traditional argument that the land was promised, according to Torah, to our ancestors, 100%. That is the traditional religious argument for the land of Israel. It's not the only argument. Secular Zionists did not rely on God promising anything, right? But yes, for religious Zionists, this is absolutely, and even religious folks who are not Zionists, who don't believe in the state of Israel, but believe that land will belong to us when God brings Mashiach and the third temple happens, right? They just think we're rushing God. We have some nerve to say God is late and we're going to make the state without you, right? So there are religious Zionists and religious anti-Zionists within Judaism.
Secular Zionists, then I take it, believe we captured it, it's ours.
So, and lots of historical claims to having lived in that land and having been exiled from that land and the right to reclaim that land. And enough people agreed with it that the Balfour Declaration passed, right? Enough of the world agreed that there was a historical claim that we had the partition into Israel and Palestine, the original partition agreement, which the Arab world rejected.
And it gets complicated because if people believe that the Torah was written by people and not by God, then what is the status of the claim?
Right. So, well, it's certainly not a religious one.
Right.
But it might be a historical one. Because if even if this was written by people, it's written a super long time ago, right? Which means already there was a Jewish people claim to that land. Okay. Now,
Our book says it's ours. What is it?
right? Our texts say it belongs to us.
Right there.
Right there it says it, black and white.
We go down this road, we'll never finish this.
I know. I'm trying to find where we were.
Road.
I know, I'm telling you. All right, so, and what happened with this El Shaddai? Blessed me and said to me, verse 4, I will make you fertile and numerous, making of you a community of peoples, and I will assign this land to your offspring to come for an everlasting possession. Now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt shall be mine. What's happening? Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine no less than Reuven and Shimon. We have the second ceremony here. This is an adoption. Yaakov is adopting Ephraim and Manasseh.
So that they will get a better portion.
Progeny born to you after them, if you have more children, they're your children. Right? They shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. So Ephraim and Manasseh are now going to inherit directly from Yaakov. And when we count the 12 tribes, we count Ephraim and Manasseh. I do this, so let's find out what's going on. I do this because when I was returning from Padan, Rachel died to my sorrow while I was journeying in the land of Canaan, when still some distance short of Ephrat. And I buried her there on the road to Ephrat, now Beit Lechem. So what does this have to do with the price of tea in China?
I have no idea.
No idea, Reuben. Any ideas?
Yeah, she would.
Okay, Pam?
That he was so connected to Rachel, and he wanted, I guess, Joseph was going to stay in Egypt, presumably, and so his children, he wanted a pure line between him and Rachel. If we're not counting Joseph's wives, kind of that line.
So why couldn't Yosef be that line?
I wonder about that. To me, it must be because he's going to stay in Egypt. And
So are Ephraim and Manasseh. We're going to be in Egypt for the next 400 years.
Yeah, I don't know that. But there's some connection, obviously,
With Rachel.
Yeah.
Rita?
Well, if she hadn't died, she would have had more children.
Exactly.
If she did die, I'm going to take these substitutes. But I have to put a plug in for Ephrat because that's my Hebrew name. My last name is Ephrat in Israel.
There you go. So Rita Ephrat is weighing in on the connection is that Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin. Right? She died in childbirth. So she was robbed of any more children. And Leah, of course, had all of these children, but it was Rachel that he loved, right? That's my Hebrew name. So Rachel the beautiful, that Jacob loved, and so he wants to give her more children in the only way that he can, which is adopting Yosef's children as his own, as if they had come from him and her, because they have, in a sense, come from him and her through Yosef.
Is there a second thing going on here, which is that he is, to some degree, mitigating their Egyptness?
It's a very, very interesting question. So if he adopts them as his own, then they are no longer the sons of the vizier of Egypt only. They are the sons of a patriarch of Israel. And what do we know about Yosef? What is he not? A patriarch. Mm-hmm. He's many things. He's certainly a doctor. He's a famous doctor. He's he did very well for himself, right? He's very successful. He never got a message that he's the next in line. He never got the promise, right, of many offspring and the land and blah, 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 blah. We never see Yosef have an interaction with God, actually. So very possibly, it's Yaakov saying, love that you're so successful. Love that you've got this Egypt thing going on. That's fabulous. It has saved our whole family. And there's something other than physical inheritance of food and all this, the palace, the horses, the chariot, everything that Joseph has. There's another inheritance at play here. There's another inheritance at stake. And he wants to make sure possibly that he's adopting those boys into that inheritance of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the divine promise and all that has meant to this family. Richard?
Perhaps he's also aware of the fact that, pharaohs come and go, who the vizier is comes and goes, their fortunes rise and fall.
As we're going to see.
But if you're plugged into the God patriarch connection, then no matter what happens, your children are safe. Your fortune, your former children,
and your fortunes, your future fortunes are in trust forever. Whereas we see very soon, what's the first part of Exodus going to be? And there arose in Egypt a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, right? And then it goes, right? It's not good for us from there. But like Richard is saying, but if you put your trust not in your power as, the secular authority, but put it instead in God, right? That's a whole nother ball game. Because here we are, right? We're still sitting here, right? Our inheritance is secure because of that. Because there was this whole other understanding of what we really inherit, right? And where to place our trust in terms of that inheritance. Okay. 8.
Noticing Joseph's sons, Israel asked, "Who are these?" And Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons whom God has given me here. Bring them up to me," he said, "that I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were dim with age. He could not see. So Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see you again, and here God has let me see your children as well." Joseph then removed them from his knees and bowed low with his face to the ground. Joseph took the two of them, Ephraim in his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, thus crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph, saying, "The God in whose ways my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who's been my shepherd from my birth to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless these lads. In them may my name be recalled, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they be teeming multitudes upon the earth."
Why don't you just finish it out?
When Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he thought it wrong. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. "Not so, father," Joseph said to his father, "for the other is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head." But his father objected, saying, "I know, my son, I know. He too shall become a people, and he too shall be great. Yet his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall be plentiful enough for nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you shall Israel invoke blessing, saying, God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be here. Well, God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. And now I assign to you one portion more than to your brothers, and I wrested him from the Amorites with my sword, which I wrested from the Amorites with my sword and bow."
Okay. So we had one ceremony, the ceremony of swearing to take care of his body. And so now we're coming to the second ceremony. So Israel takes note of Joseph's sons and says, "Who are these?" And Joseph says to his father, "These are my sons whom God has given to me here." And Jacob says, "Bring them to me that I might bless them." So people are like, wait a minute, he's lived there 17 years and he doesn't know who his grandsons are? And so other people say, oh, well, his vision is dim, right? And his eyes are... Pfft.
And he just like adopted.
This is a ceremony. Who brings this bride to be, I do. No one knows who her father is. This is the ritual. And we have in Ugarit, we have a parallel, text that has been found that is almost exactly this ceremony for adoption of an heir. And so this is absolutely normative in the ancient Near East, that if you're going to adopt, remember we talked about this with Hagar and Sarah. Do you remember we talked about adopting an heir, and then what happens if you have a natural heir and that displaces Yishmael, right? Because remember she births on the thighs. Okay, so this is a similar adoption ritual. So the formal ritual question: who are these young people? The natural biological father has to identify them. They are my sons that were born to me here. We got to make sure we got the right players, right? And that is a ritual formula.
Who gives this woman to this man?
Exactly right. Everyone in the room knows who her father is. Why do you have to ask that question? Because it's the ritual way of the parties have to identify, or someone has to identify them who has standing in the ceremony. So this is all ceremonial. These are my sons. The father says, I identify these as my sons. Bring them to me, says Yaakov, that I might bless them. Now, right, this is the other part of the ritual. And Yisrael's eyes were dim with age. He could not see. So Yosef brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. So he's having a hard time. Seeing is one interpretation, right? Because remember, that is your English translation. What does the Hebrew say? Verse 10, Ve'enei Yisrael kavdu mizaken. Rita? We're heavy from age. So.
Tired, droopy,
right? Lots of people are having surgery now to do this, right? Because if your eyes are narrower, are you laughing, Laura, at me? So, if your eyes are narrow and you're right, and this, as we age, right, then this can droop over the eye, right? The skin here can droop over the eye, and it's hard to get your eyes open. So it's possible that he's literally having trouble seeing from just his.
My doctor today, and I'm going to tell him I'm heavy with age.
My eyes are heavy with age. Keep to A9, right? That's the only reason. So the other possibility that some people point to is cataracts.
And since he can no longer see, I mean, what's
yeah.
Well, but he later says he knows who's
that's the discuss.
Right? So I want you to hold. Reuben's just lifted it up and called it out. So I want you to hold. If this is metaphorical, what does it mean? His eyes are heavy from age, and he does not see. He cannot see. What? So let's hold. What if it's metaphorical? Okay. So, and let us please remember with whom we're dealing. Who are we dealing with here?
The birthright getter.
The birthright getter. And how did he get the birthright?
His father
couldn't see. It sounds very familiar. His father couldn't see, and so he pretends to be somebody else and steals the blessing. What is he giving here? The inheritance blessing, right? And you indicated, right? Not only is he going to give the blessing, but he also is going to chooses to give to the younger what belongs in this. And remember, we've talked about this belongs absolutely in this society to the firstborn. You have to know the story to know, right, what's happening here.
That 17 years gave him time to see that Ephraim was more worthy.
Well, certainly Yaakov might be open to that as an idea, mightn't he?
Yes.
Right? Yaakov is like, okay, well, wait, why does it have to go necessarily to the firstborn? Yaakov is a great one to to be open to that idea. All right. And by the way, that's what happens every time for us. We say absolutely 100% it's the firstborn always. It's the only way you avoid war and chaos within families. It's absolute. And in every single generation of ours, what happens? It's flipped. Right? So I said to one of my bar mitzvah students that I was studying with recently, I said, so what does that say to you? That our text comes from a world that understands 100% it's always, always, always the firstborn and is flipped in every case.
Why is that?
Well, Sheldon?
I mean, this is all myth. Why is the myth makers create that?
Why do you think?
They were second borns.
They were either younger children.
Perhaps as a second born.
All right, let's say it's not because they're youngest children.
It's because life doesn't go according to all the rules. Ever.
And Torah seems not only to accept, but the myth makers created the myth that in every generation and blesses the fact, just by the fact that they become the patriarchs, that it was the right decision to flip. Right? Yishmael was the firstborn. He doesn't get it. Right? And so every single time this is what happens. And it happens with Rachel and Leah. Right? And to some extent. Right? And,
I'm firstborn, that's my problem.
Right, Sheldon? It's a burden to be the firstborn, is it not? It is. It is a huge responsibility that some of us take very seriously and grow into beautifully.
But it doesn't seem to be suggesting always challenge the rules. Just this rule.
So, and I'm not even sure it's saying challenge the rule, right? It seems that kind of to what Judith is saying, life flips things.
Children don't die before parents. You know,
They did.
all these rules get flipped.
Because the people who are creating this story live in a world with rules.
And we still do too. And yet we have gotten to the point, I think, where we know the rules don't always work. We should elect the best president. So what?
So we value democracy. We value trusting the people with the decision to choose the most powerful position in the land.
Life just does that.
And sometimes
it doesn't work.
Or it works out differently than what we usually think when we put the rule in place. Right. But Torah seems to bless that fact, right? To say we have to embrace the fact that it flips. And
the beauty of Torah is that it recognizes reality. Jealousy, hatred, envy, rules not being observed, war. These are not things that we're urged to participate in, to try to get. But it happens. Life happens to us, whether we like it or not.
Well said, Judith. Were you going to say something, Laura?
But you're suggesting that this particular flipping is blessed by Torah. I agree with what you said, but I think that that's another wrinkle to it. It's a different thing that you're talking about. Why is this particular flipping seem to be blessed when there's lots of other things that happen and get topsy-turvy that just sort of happen. Jealousies happen. So it seems like it's focused on this sibling switcheroo.
Yeah. I think possibly, this is just me talking off the top of my head, but possibly, first of all, that is one of the most powerful birth order, particularly in the ancient world. Birth order was one of the most powerful determinants of your place in this world and in life and in the social system of the extended family. Remember, we're not talking individuals. There is no idea of the individual in these texts. Of course there are individuals, but the idea is not, the individual is not the focus, ever. The clan is the focus. Your position in the clan relative to everyone else in the clan is what matters. That's why Rachel is so miserable, right? Not having more children, right? And Sarah, her agony, right? Because it's all about your social network and your social relationships. So I think, what do we see the women focusing on and not just focusing, what is it if it's more than that? Obsessing about. They're obsessing about children because that determines their status. That is the determinant of their status in that clan forever. For boys, it is their birth order. So I think it goes to the primary anxiety, and you add to that the emotional and psychological intensity of the relationships between siblings in a world where their position, right, is determined, right, is very important. And just normally, look at siblings normally, things they do to each other. It's torture living with another human being that close and sharing parents. It's torture. It's horrible. It can be fabulous and wonderful. But it has its moments. But really it's fraught with so much stuff that I think if you're going to pick one, for women it's children and pregnancy and childbirth. And for males it is their birth order. So if you're going to mess with something and really explore your relationship to flipping what you assume to be the ground rules of the game, this is one of them, or the one for them.
Speaking of flipping things, why is there no objection from Joseph over what's just happened?
So he objects.
He objects about the order. But
Yes.
But he doesn't object to the adoption.
He doesn't want to object to the adoption. Why? He wants.
In other words, if you were a parent, you would consent to having your children be adopted by your parent
Who's dying?
Who's dying?
Right? He's dying, and he's going to now leave in a huge inheritance to Joseph's sons. And I imagine it's not just material things, as we've said. He's adopting them into, right, what he understands. So I think Joseph understands this to be a loving act by his father of wanting to bring his children especially close, because he's not doing this for his other grandchildren. And so I think it's it's many layered, but I think it's understood by Joseph to be a good thing that his father wants to do for his children. But you could imagine a Joseph who says, "Oh, I don't think so. That they will be Egyptian, they will be like inheriting from here. I don't really care about this. Like, that's your business, Dad. You know, this whole patriarchy, blah blah blah, El Shaddai, whatever. That's your thing." But Joseph seems to have a relationship with the divine. Remember when he's standing before Pharaoh and Pharaoh says, "Wow, you're so good at this," and Joseph says, "It's not me, right? It's God. And the reason I got sold into slavery was so God could put me in this position, right, to save my family." So he seems to have a real sense of connection to God and not to the gods of Egypt. So I think that's...
Isn't this also an explanation of why the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are part of the 12 tribes?
Okay, so that's the other layer. Reuben is we always get reminded through Reuben and our conversation that there's two layers happening always. There's lived history and Torah history. Often Torah history is a reflection of lived history. This is most likely a remnant of a time when Manasseh was larger and more powerful than the tribe of Ephraim. Because what we tend to think, right, let's remember, I'm going to pick a marker that matches my outfit. We tend to think that there were 12 individuals, and that results in 12 tribes, right? So we would have to look to who are the individuals that defines 12 tribes. What really happened? 12 tribes needed a story to explain why the elephant has a long trunk. This is what was written by 12 tribes about 12 individuals who were all brothers, and that's how we, confederation of tribes in this neighborhood, that's why we're close. That's why it's natural that we would be a confederation, because we are kin.
Yeah,
so we create mythic kinship.
Yeah. So without there's 10.
Without Ephraim and Manasseh, there are 10. So presumably there were 10. Then you add 2, and
also doesn't get a drop. The tribe of
Levi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does not get
don't get land.
possession, a part of the division.
Of land, correct, because they're going to serve, right, instead of the firstborn.
That's also one that is not among the 12.
If we're talking about land, right, Levi's not one of the 12, but we're talking about 12 tribes that identified as a confederation. Levi's one of them. So the 12 tribes that come together, however that eventually happened, this reflects a time when the tribe of Manasseh was large and powerful, more than Ephraim. And then later, Ephraim becomes more numerous and more powerful, because there's no reason to make this up. Otherwise, says my commentary, right? This is most likely based on a historical memory that Manasseh at one point was ascendant. All right. But I just want to make sure we remember which direction it goes. Because we tend to think it starts here and becomes, and it's just, because I get how we think that way, but that's not how it is. It starts from the reality, and then this is crafted to be the explanation of how we came to be this confederation is because there were 12 brothers, right? And we descend from them.
Well, it's like that in almost any culture.
Right.
It's kind of like, it's not like the Trojans brought their origin story to Italy and the Romans got, we've got 200 years of text saying where we came from. We have a Roman poet, Virgil, writing this story of how somebody came from Troy to the land of Italy.
Right.
And founded Rome.
Exactly. All right, so...
You can move on, but I just had a very tiny little question you can kick off. I know my son, I know. Sounds very poetic and melodic and repeats itself.
So and whenever Torah repeats itself, we know something's going on, and I think it's Yaakov saying, I know, I get it, and my hands are remaining in this, right? It's saying, I know, I get it. I'm not moving my hand, right? It's completely intentional what he's doing. He doesn't explain. Right.
Well, it also proves that this was not deception. It gives it a legitimacy.
Right. So
he wasn't fooled into this. He says, I know what I'm doing. It may not seem to be the right thing, but trust me, I see.
I know and I understand. I know, and this is not a case like I did to my father, right, of deception. I know exactly what I'm doing, and right, and he doesn't move his hands.
Even with the case of Isaac, it wasn't clear that he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the words. He's it feels like him, but something's not right.
And if we really want to push it,
and he went ahead and did it.
If we really want to push it, maybe Yaakov was resentful always that he suspected Isaac really knew, but wouldn't say out loud, I know, right? And that Yaakov possibly carries that still and says, I'm not going to let that happen in the case of Ephraim and Manasseh. I'm going to say it out loud that I understand exactly what it is that's happening here, even though it's not what's expected. Barbara?
What about the part when he talks about that Jacob knows the future? He says, I know what's going to happen. Manasseh is going to be more powerful. That's why I'm doing it. And the whole idea of seeing the future in other characters in the Bible.
If you're writing it later, that's easy.
Right. If you write it after the fact, it's pretty easy to know. Hindsight is 20/20. So, I know what's going to be. So Yaakov doesn't at that point with that action is not saying I know that Ephraim is going to be ascendant over Manasseh.
I thought he said Manasseh is going to be more powerful.
What he's saying is by doing this, he's saying this is what I'm helping to create.
I thought he meant.
And so there is some level of, projecting forward, but he's saying so it's got that prophetic edge to it, and he's helping make that happen by switching his hands. And so thank you for bringing me, Barbara, to the Sefer Torah itself. So later, when he's going to bless his sons, Yaakov says, come closer and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen Miketz Yamim, at the end of days. And he's going to prophesy. And then he moves right on to blessing them. And so all the commentators go, wait a minute, Yaakov seems to know a little bit about what's going to happen and what's going to be, and now he says for sure, clearly out loud, I'm going to talk about, what's going to be ultimately, and then he doesn't. So look at, I want you to see the Torah, where this parsha begins, because in every Torah, between each parsha, there's a minimum of 9 spaces. Right? Each letter by a scribe has a certain amount of space attributed to it, and there has to be 9 spaces minimum between the end of one parsha and the beginning of the next parsha. Sometimes there's a whole line. The words stop here, and then to the end of the column, it's left blank. In every single case, as part of the rules of the game of writing a Sefer Torah. So we're going to look, if anyone who wants to, can come and see where this parsha starts. So, this word right here. Right? Bert, will you see if you can find the other parsha? The parsha before this? Okay. So here's last week's parsha, Vayigash. So if you look where we see Vayigash, there's a space. It's like this with every parsha, that at least 9 spaces are left. And like I said, sometimes it's all the way to the end of the line. But there's always this space that indicates we're starting a new Torah portion. So there's the beginning of Parashat Vayigash. It goes on, it goes on, it goes on. And you would normally say, oh, there's a break, that must be, right, the next Parsha. So there are several breaks from Vayigash, from the beginning of that Parsha. There's lots of breaks, but where does our Torah portion start? Here.
Oh.
Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim 17 Shana. Right? So Vayechi is the only portion in the Torah to start in the middle of a column. And with no space. There's not the minimum required 9 spaces here. So what is our tradition going to do with that? Is that an accident? No. Chas v'shalom. So this is the rabbi saying, yes, Yaakov was going to prophesy. And he was going to prophesy about the end of days. He was going to prophesy about everything that was coming. That, yes, Joseph and his family so powerful, and yes, you're going to have this blessing, and yes, you're going to inherit that land, but let me tell you what's going to happen before that. You're going to be slaves here for 400 years, right? And then he's going to talk about Yimei HaMashiach, the days of the Messiah. He's going to prophesy everything. And what happens? God shuts him down and says, no. First of all, they can't know what's happening right now. They can't know. It's not okay to tell these folks that you're about to enter one of the bleakest periods of your history. And about the end of days, it's not on you to talk about, right? It's not for you to tell them. And so here we get what's called Satum, and it's the most Satum, the most closed, the most sealed off Parsha in the entire Torah, is this week's Parsha. So Barbara, it goes to your point, that he seems to have the capacity, and God shuts it down, right? And says, not for you to talk about. Yes.
I'm about to die, God will be with you, and it's Father,
right?
Rabbi, is there a significance to 9 as opposed to a 7 or a 10?
I don't know where the 9 comes from exactly. Yeah, the width of something.
The Torah scribes did this, and now we're finding an explanation, or what came first, chicken or egg?
Excellent question, Ms. Efrat. So it's a scribal tradition, and then the rabbis have this wonderful.
Sounds like a scribe made a mistake one day, and everybody now has this big explanation. Right?
Which is how many wonderful explanations happen, right? Is it probably a vav got too long? Right? Or yud got too long and now it's a vav, and so we have this whole story about why it's a vav and not a yud, and right? Someone forgot to leave 9 spaces, and now we have this wonderful whole story and tradition around. Or, there is some intention that we don't exactly know about.
Saying that the 9-space tradition is the start of the Parsha.
Mm-hmm.
So back at the beginning of Vayigash.
So Vayigash had 9 spaces before the word Vayigash.
Not in this book, but
In a Torah scroll.
No, I understand, but that's way back at the beginning of this part. Not at this point where he says, gather around and I may tell you. That's really when the problem comes.
When the issue of needing to shut it down, yes. So Vayigash was last week's Torah portion. Charles just showing us that there was 9 spaces before the word Vayigash. Vayechi. So the rabbis want to explain why is there no space before Vayechi?
And it's because this is buried in Vayechi.
Because in this parsha, blah 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 happens. Okay. We're Jewish. Come on, work with me here.
Is this the only? This might be a little bit off the subject.
What?
But is this the first time? Because I don't remember us discussing it any other. Where the subject of adoption comes up, and it really was kind of glossed over because they were both adopted. But
no, it's not the first time. So, as I said, we saw it very clearly with Sarah, who has Hagar given to Abraham in order to have a son that she will birth on Sarah's knees. Right? So Hagar's going to birth. She's going to birth on Sarah's knees because that child is going to be Sarah's heir. I mean, Abraham's heir also, but Sarah has no children. And so she's going to adopt Hagar's child as her own. And that's that ceremony with knees. Right? And we saw it here. Right? We saw that he takes them off of Yaakov's knees. So clearly they've been either between his knees or, somehow that ritual aspect of adoption.
all right, I don't remember. We'll talk about it someplace else, maybe.
I'm sorry?
I said we'll talk about the subject someplace else, but that's not necessarily relevant to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, but so tell me what you want to know about this idea of adoption in the ancient world or in Torah.
Well, in terms of inheritance, in terms of favor, that sort of thing.
So it would have been that if someone didn't have a natural heir, that they would adopt an heir. So sometimes when we look at the women of the Torah, like we talked about with Sarah and Hagar, it might have been because there are implications ritually for what the descendant does for the ancestor. And that by adopting a descendant, you are not only giving an inheritance, you are obligating somebody to do the rituals for you as an ancestor that won't happen if you don't have an heir. By the time Torah comes along, those rituals we don't have anymore, but it definitely was what happened in the ancient Near East and has to impact early Israel. And so we only talk about it in terms of inheritance, but it would have been also obligations to the ancestor that you get adopted by.
Rather, the stories that became the Torah were orally transmitted. So it wasn't until the time that the Torah became
written
that they could have thought about leaving spaces of this kind.
Correct.
So you couldn't. It probably was not part of the original story being forwarded.
Absolutely. So there's many midrashim that only make sense once you're dealing with a written tradition, right? That if you're dealing with an oral tradition, would not be the same, right? First of all, there's visual midrashim, but also spelling of words, things like that. Why is a hey here and not like on Rivka? It says hana'ar instead of na'ara. There's a hey missing. It says the youth, but it's a male youth. A hey needs to be there for it to be a female youth. So but only in a written tradition do we then have a lot of midrash to explain why she's referred to as a male youth and not a female youth, right? So, exactly. So it's a good thing to remember that there's different phases and different stages of the evolution of the text. All right, let's close with this business. Turn to page 2. So the back of your first page. Go down to the paragraph that starts in this parasha.
And where is this from?
Right.
They're numbered at the top right, page 2 of 4.
And where is this from?
This is shamash.org, which once upon a time is where I got most of my commentary from. All right, so we ready? In this parasha, we're taught that Jacob's eyes too were kavdu mizokain, clouded or heavy with age. Having endured the turmoil of his life, fleeing from his dysfunctional family, running from his enraged brother, being tricked initially out of marrying his beloved Rachel, failing to see the turmoil raging amongst his sons, enduring the apparent death of his beloved son Joseph, Jacob lacks more than 20/20 eyesight. Throughout his life, he is unable to open his heart enough to see the beauty before his eyes. That is, he is unable to do so, and this is this person's commentary, or their opinion. He's unable to do so until this week's parasha, until he finally realizes at the end of his life that he must transcend his suffering and embrace those he wants to love with fullness and openness. So he wraps his arms around his grandchildren Manasseh and Ephraim and calls them his own. He offers them blessings because he recognizes, he finally sees that they are part of his blessing. Soon thereafter, he blesses all of his children, offering them wisdom based on his new insight. How sad it is that Jacob has to wait until the end of his days to see the blessings and beauty that surround him. To help us move from such blindness, our Jewish holy days encourage us to see what really is and what really can be. We learn from Hanukkah that in the midst of darkness, we can increase the brightness in our lives and in our world, allowing us to see more clearly. We learn from Pesach that in the midst of hopelessness, we can envision a better tomorrow and move forward into a brighter future. And we learn from Yom Kippur that when we step back from those sensations that confuse or control us, we can gain sight inside ourselves to glimpse the truth that resides within. Will you learn to see life as it truly is? Will you find a way to envision the blessings that are and can be yours? May you, differently from Yaakov, find that insight earlier, now, so that you can still enjoy the blessings that surround you. Let this be a guiding question for us this Shabbat. Are we open to seeing the blessing? Remember that the people of Israel will be blessed forever with may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And generally the rabbis say, well, why Ephraim and Manasseh? Like, really, they're not even the patriarchs. And they say, well, they're the first two brothers to get along, right? I like this interpretation for me for the next little while of that blessing, thinking about it as, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, who extended Yaakov's story into a future he wouldn't see. May you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, who open people's hearts, right, in response to you, who become agents for people seeing differently just because of love and connection and in ways that aren't normative. They're not his sons, right? In non-normative ways, may we be to each other real agents of an ability to see and to open up and to and I believe to hope, because blessing is always, of course, about hope. And right now, more than ever, we need to hang on to hope for a future that is brighter than what we can see of it right now. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.